I'm here with Courtney Lohmann. Courtney is an award-winning leader, renowned expert in corporate social responsibility and sustainability, and a highly sought-after keynote speaker. With 25 years of experience in the events, hospitality, and tourism industry, she's channeled her adventurous spirit into becoming an impact expert. In 2023, Courtney launched her own consulting agency to help business leaders achieve their sustainability and social impact goals. I met Courtney when we both gave TED Talks at TEDx Taft Avenue. Courtney talked about the power of sustainability and individual action creating collective might, and a great anecdote about trash elephants. So Courtney, it's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Can't wait to talk.
I'm excited for our audience to learn some brand new things they might have never heard about before, including this. What is a keynote speech?
Keynote speech. I guess I would define it as someone who has the ability to stand in front of an audience. I don't define audience by size from a keynote standpoint, but someone who can stand in front of an audience and present a unique idea, a unique solution, learned opportunity from their life experiences and their work experiences that they can then inspire that audience to go back into their day-to-day and utilize some of those tools or learnings or outcomes or what have you to better whatever it is that they're doing. So whether that's from a personal standpoint or a professional standpoint, that they can utilize those tools to go forward.
So here's who I am. Here's what I've done. Here's what you can do. Is that fair?
I would say that's pretty fair. Yeah. From that more of that pinch of inspiration is how do you take this and implement it?
How did you take your message and your life story and become a keynote speaker?
It's interesting. So I started speaking in front of audiences as far back as high school, but that's not really applicable here. But as far back as 2016, when I was starting to share new strategies, new ways to implement, new ways to design events to be sustainable and offer socially impactful solutions. And those types of sessions then that I was creating were very much rooted in education, rooted in that here's the tactical solutions that you need to better your events or to better how your business is operating. And as I continued to do more of that, naturally, some of those personal stories of my own journey of how I found solutions and how things would inspire me to make different choices, or how I would sit down and create a new solution to solve a problem that I was seeing based on all the work I was doing. Those things started to creep more and more and more into how I was presenting this very tactical kind of information. And so that then started to spin into this idea that, holy cow, perhaps this can become something different. And maybe I do have a more personal story to share that has that inspirational element that I think a keynote really needs. And so that's really how it evolved over many years of presenting that kind of tactical data and then recognizing where my personal stories and successes and challenges really bled into that type of work.
When you originally gave these speeches, what percentage of the speech was tactical data? And then how much tactical data is in there now?
When I first started, it was 100% tactical. And I would say now it's probably more of like a 40% or so. You take that structure of a keynote, and in 60 minutes of a tactical presentation, it is, for lack of a better term, your data. And people are walking away with 30, 40 things that they feel like they could really use and implement. When you look at building a keynote, people's attention span is different because of the atmosphere that they're sitting within. And so you really want to break it down to give them like somewhere between 3 to 5. I'm a big believer in 3. So I break down my keynote into 3 big ideas that each have an idea underneath them. People feel like they can really retain exactly what it is that speaks to them the most, and they can walk out of the room and have something actionable that they can do.
What are some examples of those big ideas you arranged the keynotes with?
Oh. So I take my keynote's Impact Rebel, and it's really tapping into the idea that we should all bring our passion and our purpose into the work that we do. And that by identifying what our passion is, blending it with the purpose of our work, that we can push ourselves into this leadership role by showcasing how we can think differently. So I tie to this idea that a leader is just someone that has the ability to bring a vision to fruition. I think in a corporate setting, we often think that a leader is somehow designated by your job title and where you sit on the org chart. And that's really not what it is. And so if you have a passion for something and you identify it, and you can show people and somehow within the work that you're doing how that passion fits with the company's purpose in some way, shape, or form. Now you're moving yourself into this place of leadership by showcasing how, if we start to implement this innovative idea that I have around my passion, we have the ability to change what we're offering our clients, find a different solution, innovate a new solution, et cetera. It could be multiple things. But that's really how I piece that together.
Impact Rebel is rebelling against the traditional understanding of leadership or something else?
Impact Rebel is rebelling against the tradition of dot dot dot. It's several things in there. So it's the traditional sense of what we're supposed to do at work. It's that idea that you're supposed to sort of like check yourself at the door and only come in to that environment as your professional self. Like, why do we have to separate the two so much? That old way of thinking. I think when we bring our passion or we bring our authenticity into the door, like walking through the door with it, I think we come in already as a more innovative, creative, strategic thinker because we're utilizing what's unique to us and bringing it to the company. So it's that sense. And then also from that sense of a leader is not told they're a leader is found from within. And so when you start to tap into your own sense of leadership, you then step into a role outwardly of what it means to be a leader.
How long is your typical Impact Rebel keynote?
They typically are booked for about a 60-minute or so time frame.
How did you figure out that 60 minutes was the right length?
I wouldn't say that I figured out that the 60 minutes was the right length. I have delivered it in as short as 20 and feel as though people, like the audience, can get a good takeaway from that. If anything, I would sometimes argue that the 60 minutes is probably more than people need to sit in order to retain the best. I think if I were selling it by myself day in and day out, I'd probably sell it right at about 45 minutes. I feel like the content is very tight at that time frame. It is pulled together really well. And the excitement stays at a really good level, like from an energy standpoint. But I could absolutely fill that 60 minutes when needed.
When you're putting together the keynote, is it line by line, word for word memorization or something else?
I am not. I am not that way at all. It's really kind of funny. My process, and I think this is rooted from what I was doing those tactical sessions, is that I open up a PowerPoint presentation and I start with just text fields on a slide that are bullet point lists of the order I think it's best to start to deliver the content. So it's a very 30,000-foot level of here's what the content needs to be. These are the big picture ideas I want to get across. These are the specific examples I want to use. And then I take it as a puzzle and I start to move those slides around until I feel like it's in the right order, that it's going to make sense. And then from there, I create imagery, graphics, things like that. But I never write word for word. Never.
There's reports of musicians who've been touring forever, getting bored with some of their own classics, but the audience really wants to hear the classics.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that feeling when you're giving these keynotes?
That's pretty hard. I think we all start to get bored when we hear the same thing over and over again, right? So those of us that are in this space and in creating this content for the audience, I think what we have to focus on is the connection with the audience. So I could get up and deliver my keynote with zero energy, zero inflection. I could just read it off a piece of paper and the audience is going to walk away with virtually nothing. The content hasn't changed, but the audience walks away with virtually nothing. So I really focus on not the idea of the words coming out of my mouth, but the energy of what I bring as soon as I step on stage. And then how do I interact with that audience while I'm there? What can I gain from them? If they're really engaged in one point, then maybe I stay on that for an extra minute and just really give them what they feel like they need versus me trying to run through my content when maybe that's not really what needs to happen for that group. So that's how I try to really stay engaged on that personal level.
We've talked about structure, we've talked about spontaneity and being present. What are other best practices for people putting together keynotes?
I think you really have to practice a lot by yourself. I think that's something people don't realize and don't understand. I think it's great. I'm not a big give the presentation in front of the mirror. There's something about that very distracting for me, but I do think it's really useful to record yourself, or if you've been recorded, to watch recordings of yourself. I think it's the more you can stand up in a space and work through your content, move your body, start to get a feel for what you want to do, the better off you're going to be.
You just gave us some best practices for keynotes. What about common mistakes that you see slash you used to make?
Common mistakes. I think sometimes keynote speakers can be too restricted in their content and not willing to maybe meet an audience where they are. That kind of tags on to where I was saying that I try to use the audience's energy. Even back when I was giving those tactical presentations, if I saw puzzled looks in the crowd, I would stop my presentation and say, okay, I'm seeing that some people look like this is a little confusing. Do we want to pause here and ask questions? Right? If you can't have some of that flexibility to really be in touch with your audience, I think that's where you lose. And I think there's keynote speakers that have come up against challenges because they're very rigid with how they're going to present. And it's only going to be this way and it's memorized this way. And that's all I'm going to do. I definitely think the audiences of the future, meaning as we get different generations that are sitting in the rooms, that we need to really have that understanding of meeting them where they are and ensuring that they're relating to the content we're developing.
There's a Japanese term that roughly translates to reading the air, which you might call audience awareness. What
Yeah.
are some ways that we can read the air aside from looking at facial expressions?
I think sometimes you can get a sense of energy that's in the room. It's good to be connected to that. I haven't had the opportunity per se to do this a lot, although I try to do it when I can. But back in the day when I hired a lot of keynote speakers as a former meeting and event planner, I would have some, not many, but some keynote speakers that came in the day before and would ask to attend some of the social functions with the audience the evening prior so that they could start to get a sense of who their audience was before they stepped on stage. It didn't necessarily mean that you're changing any of your content. I think it just helps you understand where the audience is coming from. And then that might change how your energy hits them when you are on stage. So I think that's a really good tactic that I hope to continue to implement more as I move forward.
Let's say that I've given a TEDx. In this case, actually, I've given a TEDx, but let's assume that there's someone else who has some speech that they have and they want to
Yeah.
start doing a keynote. Let's say they want to do a one-to-one. This is my TEDx. This is my keynote. What are some things that might work for them in a TEDx or a 10-minute speech style context that they're going to have to change for that keynote?
Yeah, that's interesting. My TEDx was based on some of the stories that I have used in my keynote, but I really had to shorten them down in order to logically string them together and still provide that sense of purpose to the message I was ultimately trying to get across. So I think if you're going to reverse engineer that, you need to look at how you expand each part of your TEDx, what that really means, because sometimes when you go to expand something, so if you're trying to fit something into a 60-minute keynote, you go to expand, you might realize you don't have enough relevant content in one thing. And so you may be able to expand to some degree, but then have to look at what else are you going to add. TEDx is all about your one big idea. I think a keynote has a big idea, but that big idea needs to be supported by somewhere around 3 to 5 tactical takeaways. So if you can't build 3 to 5 tactical takeaways, then you've probably need to restructure what your big idea is going to be for your keynote.
Maybe it's take the TEDx and then write 2 other TEDx's on parallel topics and then see the umbrella they can all go under.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that could work. It depends on where you start, right, with your TEDx, what your TEDx is, but that could potentially work. Yeah, for sure.
And any stylistic differences you would point out between successful keynotes and successful shorter speeches like TEDx's?
Funny enough, I found the TEDx to be very restrictive. So being the longer form, even when I've delivered my keynote in a 20-minute, I have felt like that can be a very effective for the inspirational and tactical approach you want to take. The TEDx really forces you to narrow so far down that I found it to feel more restrictive. I also, just full disclosure, I am a run from end to end of the stage kind of keynote presenter. I have a lot of high energy, so to only have to stand in that small little TEDx red circle was a challenge, something that was a challenge for me. That might be particular to me.
Courtney, you've given awesome advice on trying to put together this original keynote. Let's say that there's some people in our audience, and based on conversations, I think this is the case, where they've spoken competitively, they are good at what they do, and they're thinking, I can put together a 45, 60-minute speech. I can get there. But then what? What can you tell them about going from, I've got the speech, I've got the idea, now I've got to get in front of people? What should they do?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. $1 million question. You have to be able to take your keynote after you've written it in that, that long style format. And then you really have to be able to summarize it on one page. And that page should be a pretty marketing piece that has some graphics or pictures of you or what have you, and shows the people that are going to hire you, which is typically an event planner, meeting planner kind of individual. These are the specific audience takeaways. The audience is going to learn this. The audience is going to know this, etc. This is the value that I'm bringing to your group. This is why it's relevant to what's going on. Type of document. And that's the document that you have to use to really sell what your keynote is. No one wants to get on the phone with you and hear you talk for 30 minutes about what your keynote is. They want to be able to look at it because you will be compared against 20, 30, 40 other speakers for a one slot type of position. So that to me is the next big step is, now you've written 60 minutes. How do you put it on one page that sells why this is the keynote the planner should buy?
If people want to see your one page and see whether you're the right fit, where can they find you?
They would contact me directly, and then that gets sent out. I have a speaker packet that gets sent out with several different pieces of collateral, but that's where they would get it from. So it's not something necessarily that's just downloadable, but it is available upon request.
Now, let's say they want to find you for that reason or any other reason. Where across the internet is Courtney Lohmann?
Courtney Lohmann is at courtneylohmann.com. And also on LinkedIn, for the most part, I do have a YouTube page that is continuing to get developed. And I think for speakers in particular, I think the best places for our energies to be used are to be creating short form type videos that support the message that we're trying to get out and using YouTube specifically for that. And then utilizing LinkedIn to connect from that business to business standpoint.
Courtney, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. I know that people listening right now very, very much appreciate it, as do I.
This was awesome. I'm so happy I was here. I can't wait to hear from all the wonderful experts you have on. Thanks for having me.